Welcome back, friends, to another episode of the Juicebox Podcast.
Hi, my name is Stephanie. I am 35, and I have been a type 1 diabetic since I was 11 years old, diagnosed in the year 2000.
Please don't forget that nothing you hear on the Juicebox Podcast should be considered advice, medical or otherwise. Always consult a physician before making any changes to your healthcare plan or becoming bold with insulin. I know this is going to sound crazy, but Blue Circle Health is a nonprofit that's offering a totally free virtual type 1 diabetes clinical care, education, and support program for adults 18 and up. You heard me right. Free. No strings attached. Just free. Currently, if you live in Florida, Maine, Vermont, New Hampshire, Ohio, Delaware, Missouri, Alabama, Mississippi, Iowa, or Louisiana, you're eligible for Blue Circle Health right now, but they are adding states quickly in 2025. So make sure to follow them at Blue Circle Health on social media and make yourself familiar with bluecirclehealth.org. Blue Circle Health is free. It is without cost. There are no strings attached. I am not hiding anything from you. bluecirclehealth.org. You know why they had to buy an ad? No one believes it's free. This episode of the Juicebox Podcast is sponsored by the Omnipod 5. Learn more and get started today at omnipod.com/juicebox. Check it out. This episode of the Juicebox Podcast is sponsored by the Dexcom G7, the same CGM that my daughter wears. Check it out now at dexcom.com/juicebox.
Hi, my name is Stephanie. I am 35, and I have been a type 1 diabetic since I was 11 years old, diagnosed in the year 2000.
I was going to say it's 24 years ago.
Yeah, we're coming up on it.
Yeah. You took me all. Yeah, I had all that opportunity for simple math that makes people feel like, oh my God, he's really good at math. Because I would have been like, oh, that was 24 years ago in the year 2000.
It makes it really convenient.
Yeah, right. My son was born in 2000. So it's the best time to have a kid born, because whatever year it is, that's how old they are. And he was born at the beginning of the year. So there's not even a lot to remember. You were 11?
I was 11. Yeah.
Only child, brothers and sisters?
I was a middle child, and I was actually diagnosed. This is always going to kind of haunt me right the day before my older sister's birthday. So we spent her birthday celebration in the hospital during my diagnosis, which I still feel bad about.
Was she mad about it?
I mean, how could she be? I mean, probably, but she would never say that to me.
You've never asked her?
I haven't.
I would ask. I would ask on her birthday, by the way, because then if it did bother her, then you would be able to ruin that birthday too with the
excellent
the memory really holding over her head. Did you feel it back then? Oh gosh, look what's happened.
Definitely. It was an interesting time for diagnosis for sure. Just kind of starting puberty, and so I was super kind of aware of our family dynamics anyway, with my older sister just went through puberty. I was starting. So we had a lot of just women in the house. We had a lot of hormones in the house. And then kind of to add to it, this new diagnosis that really changed our lifestyle and changed a lot of our family dynamic for a long time. I was super aware of the diagnosis and how it impacted our family. Definitely.
Tell me more about, I know this isn't why you're really here, but tell me more about how you think it impacted your family.
The time I was diagnosed, it was an interesting time in our family anyway, because my parents were going through a divorce and they were kind of starting that process right at the time that I was starting to get sick.
Oh.
It required a lot of communication between the two of them at a time where maybe they didn't want to be communicating as much, or they were kind of trying to figure out what life looked like. They were also kind of dealing with this idea of having life changes and a sick kid at the time, and a sick kid who was turning into a teenager that they had to kind of deal with and figure out the new normal. So I think it impacted us a lot, and that it kind of forced us to continue being a family unit and to communicate on my health. When I would stay with my mom versus when I would stay with my dad, it required so much communication about insulin dosing. And at the time, about my shots, about my carb ratios, things like that at the time.
Yeah. Can I ask a question that's going to, if it's none of my business, you'll just say it's none of my business, right?
Yeah.
But I feel like contextually it might help the conversation. So you can be vague if you want to be at all. Why were they getting divorced? They just hate each other? Somebody cheat on somebody? Like, what was the severity of what happened? Like, I'm trying to gauge how much they didn't want to talk to each other.
They didn't want to talk to each other.
Oh, okay. I hear what he did. Okay. Now,
They would have preferred, and my parents were like really quite wonderful about it. Honestly, as kids, we didn't know anything was wrong till we knew everything was wrong.
gotcha.
They never fought in front of us. We really didn't have any idea what was going on. So for me, like as we were kind of navigating it, and I was kind of, definitely the source of what required them to communicate for a long time. That's kind of when I realized, like, oh, they don't want to talk to each other.
Oh, and they did it anyway.
They did. Yeah,
Oh, that's awesome. Did you feel badly for putting them back together again in that situation?
totally.
Really? At 11, you felt that?
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely.
How does that manifest for you? Do you remember?
I wouldn't say at 11 necessarily, but like certainly in those like couple of first years about it, just was a lot of like guilt surrounding it, or just feeling like if, during those first couple years of like starting to get independence with diabetes management, and I didn't always handle it in the most graceful of ways, like knowing that also required them to have to communicate on an action plan, like kind of added to the.
What does that mean you didn't always deal with it in the most graceful ways?
I think if you're really asking how it manifested, I think it manifested in a lot of like diabetes rebellion when I was younger.
Okay.
This thing that I didn't want, that we spent a lot of time right at the beginning kind of getting in good shape and getting everybody on board. And then I started having some independence with it and really found it to be too much to handle. And so I would, lie about blood sugars, or I would totally forget to test and pretend like I did. I'd come back to my mom's and she would check my meter and see like, oh gosh, like you haven't been testing all weekend that you've been with your dad. And then that would cause them to have a conversation about it. And I don't know what that was, but I would certainly feel bad about it because I felt like, my actions definitely impacted their relationship and made them have to kind of co-parent more closely.
Did you not ever have the feeling of like, if I can keep them talking about this, maybe they'll get back together?
Oh, no.
No, okay.
No.
I feel like I want to interview your mom, but okay.
Oh my, she would love it.
So I was just wondering if you ever were just like, oh, if I don't test a couple times, then mom has to call dad and then they talk, and maybe you didn't have, like I used to dream about my parents getting back together. That didn't happen for you.
Not at all.
Oh,
No. It made sense. Them being separate made sense, and still to this day made sense.
I want to be clear. It made sense that my parents were divorced too, but I still like kind of like childishly, like I wanted my family together, So anyway,
sure.
yeah. Okay. So more about the guilt. Let's really just dive right in. I have a whole focus this year I'm going to be doing with people. So interesting you brought this up so early in the year. What do you mean you felt guilty? Not just about them talking. You felt guilty about other stuff, right? About the diabetes and how you were managing it. The Dexcom G7 is sponsoring this episode of the Juicebox Podcast, and it features a lightning fast 30-minute warm-up time. That's right. From the time you put on the Dexcom G7 till the time you're getting readings, 30 minutes. That's pretty great. It also has a 12-hour grace period, so you can swap your sensor when it's convenient for you. All of that on top of it being small, accurate, incredibly wearable, and light. These things, in my opinion, make the Dexcom G7 a no-brainer. The Dexcom G7 comes with way more than just this. Up to 10 people can follow you. You can use it with type 1, type 2, or gestational diabetes. It's covered by all sorts of insurances. And this might be the best part. It might be the best part. Alerts and alarms that are customizable so that you can be alerted at the levels that make sense to you. Dexcom.com/juicebox. Links in the show notes. Links at juiceboxpodcast.com to Dexcom and all of the sponsors. When you use my links, you're supporting the production of the podcast and helping to keep it free and plentiful. My daughter is 20 years old. I can't even believe it. She was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes when she was 2, and she put her first insulin pump on when she was 4. That insulin pump was an Omnipod, and it's been an Omnipod every day since then. That's 16 straight years of wearing Omnipod. It's been a friend to us, and I believe it could be a friend to you. Omnipod.com/juicebox. Whether you get the Omnipod DASH or the automation that's available with the Omnipod 5, you are going to enjoy tubeless insulin pumping. You're going to be able to jump into a shower or a pool or a bathtub without taking off your pump. That's right, you will not have to disconnect to bathe with an Omnipod. You also won't have to disconnect to play a sport or to do anything where a regular tube pump has to come off. Arden has been wearing an Omnipod for 16 years. She knows other people that wear different pumps, and she has never once asked the question, should I be trying a different pump? Never once. Omnipod.com/juicebox. Get a pump that you'll be happy with forever.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. And that lasted, honestly, a long time. I was and am definitely I like having control. I like performing well. I like pleasing everyone. And I knew for a very long time that this was an area of my life that I was just kind of like skating by and holding on by a thread. And I felt a ton of guilt for that. My mom sacrificed a lot at the beginning to like truly understand diabetes and help me get healthy. And she later down the line, like I learned so much from her and so much from her advocacy at the beginning that I carried into like what I want to talk about today more.
Yeah.
And so I felt guilty, right? Like I wasn't doing a good job. I wasn't performing. People were disappointed in me. And I felt that way through my teenage years, through college, honestly, with diabetes management. Every time I'd go to the endocrinologist, it was a really negative experience. It was either like my mom found out that my management wasn't going as well as she'd like it or as it should be, or she'd find out that I wasn't testing, or the doctor would kind of give me a fear lecture and it would, scare both of us. So I think there was a lot of guilt at the beginning, and I felt like I was kind of so deep in a hole that this was just what diabetes was and what the management was. I really didn't know anything else.
With the hindsight, retrospect, do you really think your mom was disappointed in you?
Somewhat. I think it kind of, sometimes I think it shattered her illusion of like, oh, she has it all together. Like, I know she has it. I'm confident in her. And so I think we'd go in and she'd be like, oh, take it back. Like, I'm not as confident anymore in this. She doesn't have it all together. So I felt like I would sometimes disappoint her in that way. But I also feel like she'd kind of feel disappointed in herself too, of like, how did I get so distant from this care? Like, how do I get back in? She won't let me back in.
She never said to you, Stephanie, I'm disappointed.
Not that I remember.
Do you remember her being supportive?
I remember her being supportive. I remember her being stern. Like kind of switching to stern mode a lot during my teenage years of like, if you don't do this, this is going to happen.
Yeah.
I think she definitely was scared by what the doctors would say when we'd go to the endocrinologist, and I'd have an A1C that it wasn't what she was expecting. And I think, that fear, because she kind of had the gift of, more time on this earth and being able to see how health impacts your life. And I felt invincible at the time.
Did you ever notice her? I watched my mom try to pivot to like, this is what I think a male figure would do in this situation. Did she do that stuff? Like, do you know what I mean? Like suddenly get harsher or more firm than she was in the past, or like that pressure of having to be both parents?
Yeah, I would say.
Yeah. I always felt bad about that, where I was like, well, my mom is saying something right now that she doesn't even like. This is not her inclination. She's doing her best estimation of what she thought my dad would have said there. It was kind of interesting.
That's really interesting. I've never thought of it that way.
Yeah. I'm very interested in this because, my daughter's 20. She's almost 21 now, right? And, we have conversations about diabetes pretty constantly. And what I've come to realize is that a lot of the minutia that's happened over the years that puts us in the positions we're in or causes us to make decisions that we make, they get forgotten. And the only thing that gets remembered is the part that's uncomfortable. I don't know if that makes sense or not.
It totally does.
And then it's like, oh, like you're always doing this or this always happens or whatever. Like, and you're like, well, no, that's because of this. And they're like, there's no remembrance of that part. Like, I didn't do that. This is a response to that. And I don't mean like a person did. I'm saying like a medical thing comes up and then you're like, okay, well, I guess we have to do this now. And then later it kind of gets transposed into something a little different than what it actually was. And they're young. So you're not holding them accountable for remembering every second. But like, I remember it like, like somebody burned it into my brain. And then, you can tell, like even with Arden, who does like extraordinarily well taking care of herself, right? Especially for her age and everything. Like I've said here before, like away at college by herself, Arden was keeping a 6.5 A1C.
Wow.
Yeah. And then, as soon as she comes home and like the bad food goes away, that 6.5 becomes like 6.2, taking care of it by herself at 20. Like she's doing, like, it's awesome. And I tell her constantly how well she's doing, but I think she thinks I'm disappointed. I think it's maybe something you can't avoid. Like I'm starting to wonder about all these people over the years that have come to me and said, like, my parents were always disappointed in me. Were they? I'm sure some of them were. Like, don't get me wrong. I'm sure some of the people's parents are like garbage parents, right? Like, I don't imagine that's not true. I can tell you from my perspective, I've never been disappointed in Arden, and I don't believe I've ever said that I have been. So, like, is there something about the nature of these conversations that we have to have about diabetes all the time that just leaves a child feeling like they're not doing well enough, no matter how well they're doing or how hard they're trying?
I think absolutely, and I think it's not even just in childhood, but it's the language that's used around this disease is like, I even experienced it recently of getting told like, oh, you're a good diabetic. Like, are you good or are you bad? Did you do a good job or did you not do a good job? I remember one of the things I had to tell my spouse when we first kind of started communicating about diabetes was to stop asking so much about why, where I'd be like, oh, I don't feel well, my blood sugar's high. Yeah. And he'd say, why? And I'd be like, it doesn't matter why. Like when you ask why, it makes me think I've done something wrong and I have to rationalize like what happened and what I did. And I think there's a lot of that as a kid, a lot of like explaining why, what happened, what did you do? And it comes across and it makes you feel like you didn't do it right.
I think it would be better if you just were raised by wolves. Like, so,
right?
So you didn't have to have like all those human interactions, then you could just be feral and then it'd be fine. I think we're a couple thousand years away from being as thoughtful as we need to be to navigate all of this. We're getting better, but we're not good at it.
Totally.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you sharing that with me because it's going to be on my mind. It's always on my mind, honestly. When Arden was younger, it was more on my mind about like, I wonder what's happening right now that I don't realize is happening. And I'll have to tell you something. Like my youngest brother, Rob, who of course now is, a man in his 40s. I thank him for that. Because for that way of thinking, because Rob was always in so much trouble as a child that there were two like stasises for Rob. He was either getting in trouble and you weren't aware of it, or he was in trouble and you knew about it. And he's not like that anymore. He's actually an upstanding citizen who helps put satellites into space. But back then, he was a dick. So I hope he hears this. But he taught me that nothing that's happening is really what's happening. It's something else is always happening somewhere else, and you just haven't learned about it yet or heard about it, and it's going to impact soon enough.
Mm-hmm.
When I think about my relationships with my kids, and it's a little overwhelming because I don't think people are wired to think like this yet. Like, I don't think we're smart enough for this yet, but like, you're not just making a decision about like now, you're making a decision about now and how does it affect tomorrow? But then how does it affect a year from now? And how does it affect the other people in the room? Yes, I said, oh gosh, let's stop here because we have to change Arden's pod. Did I know that 10 years later, my son would be like, we were always doing things for Arden?
Mm-hmm.
Even though my son and I traveled the country and every weekend playing baseball together. I was with him constantly, but the way he remembers it is that Arden got more attention.
Yeah.
And then when you talk to Arden about it, the way she remembers it is, you pay too much attention to me. And you were always at baseball with Cole. And Cole never came to my softball games because he was busy playing baseball. And you're like, oh God, everyone's perspective is so, we're in the same house and yet their experience in their life is so different.
Yeah.
And then as the parent, you're just standing there going like, I don't know what to do about any of this. I'm a moron. Okay. Like I don't understand what's happening half the time. I'm also a person who you know why I'm good at podcasting? Because I explain my feelings in real time.
Mm-hmm.
That's not great in personal interactions. In case you're wondering, when people are looking for concise statements and I've got to talk for 4 minutes to figure out what I think, I have that problem. So I stand around going like, what's the right thing to do? In my head, I'm like, what's the right thing to do? What's the right thing to do? What I need to do is talk it out loud. But the people around me, only one of them thinks the way I do. The other two think opposite.
Mm-hmm.
So when I start talking, they're like, what the f is this guy doing? And I'm like thinking to myself, like, people love this on a podcast. I don't know why you're not enjoying it right now. And I'm trying to get through it, and I will get through it. Like, I'll get to the end. But then when I get to the end, like, here's a secret for all you people who are younger or don't have babies yet or something like that. I've just gotten to what makes the best sense to me in the moment. I don't know if I'm right. And then I've got to put that thing into action. And then if it blows up, it's my fault. And if it goes right, what I've learned is no one remembers I did it. Being alive is terrible.
This is a great pep talk for somebody with a 16-month-old.
I was going to say, you just had a baby.
We're just getting started.
No. Yeah, listen. You are in a game. Ready? Everybody want to get bummed out? People who have children will be like, this guy is preaching. He knows exactly what he's talking about. But if you don't have kids yet, you're going to be like, hey, man, calm down. You're in a game. You cannot win. You cannot win this game. No matter what you do, it's going to be remembered as you did the wrong thing by somebody in some situation. So good luck.
Thank you, Scott.
I wasn't even talking to you. I was talking to everybody. It's still incredibly fulfilling and rewarding. But I sent a text to a friend last night. I had a day yesterday where everyone in my family needed something, and it all connected with each other. No one was happy, and I did not know what to do. And when I try to help, people are like, don't fix it. And when I don't help, they stare at me like, how come you haven't figured it out?
Why haven't you done anything?
So you cannot win. And I sent this note. A friend of mine checked on me yesterday. I said, how you doing? I was like, I'm having a day. Like, I can't even talk to you right now. And they checked on me again later, which was lovely. And I said, I think at some point, and I didn't mean this defeatedly, because by then everything had been okay, but I meant this just academically. I understand how so many adults just give up eventually on this. And they just go, you know what? You're 18, you're 20. I got you through college. Go live your own life. Because you're not listening to me. I have old ideas at this point. My brain's not working fast enough to keep up with all this anymore. Like, I have my own stuff. Like, I'm, like 53. Like, I don't know how people think success works, but if you're not born wealthy, you know what I mean? Like, I'm just getting comfortable and I'm almost done. You know what I mean? Like, I'm in that mad dash to make like try to save money for a few years before I retire. I can't stop in the middle of the day to have a 5-hour conversation with 17 different people so that everybody feels good when it's over. And then, by the way, when it's over, everybody doesn't feel good.
Right.
Yeah. But all they remember, Stephanie, is that I didn't get it right. So anyway, this kid, when was it born?
My son was born in September 2023.
Congratulations.
So he's 16 months now.
Oh, that's wonderful. And you're here to announce that his name is Scott. Is that correct?
Oh, gosh.
No, never mind. It doesn't matter. One of you.
Has it happened yet? Have you found a Scott yet?
I got an Arden for a baby. And I think people have stolen our pets' names, which I guess is cool. But no, I'm not getting Scott's a terrible name. So I'm not getting a Scott. Like, I know that now. But during COVID, I thought it was going to happen. I thought you guys would all be like at home just listening to podcasts 24/7. You'd get bored, knock each other up, and then they'd be like, oh, that guy on that podcast. That's when I thought it was going to happen for sure. But I guess that's not happening. All right. So your first kid?
Yes.
Okay. You wrote to me about wanting to talk about advocating during pregnancy, specifically to use modern technology during labor and delivery. Stephanie, it sounds like you have a soapbox already and you need to tell us something. What is it?
No, I wrote to you initially to thank you, first off, because I could never have gone through pregnancy without finding your podcast. And it's actually pretty funny because when we kind of decided we were going to move forward, I went to the high-risk OB and had my first consultation appointment. It didn't go great. The perspective was really different than my perspective. And I was just feeling pretty like back in the Stone Ages when I left. I came home and I remember feeling like, I feel like I'm going back to my teenage years of like kind of doctors telling me what's right and wrong, telling me what I can and can't do. And I had gotten to this stage of like really good management and feeling super confident. And I felt like there's no way I can go back to this. Like I can't go back to them telling me how many carbs I'm allowed for breakfast. I can't go back to calling my doctor and having them make adjustments. But like, I didn't have any context for that. I just like knew that's how I was feeling. And so I for the longest time, never looked anything up online related to diabetes because I was so afraid of like, you'd Google it and it would tell you like the 60 ways you're going to die today. And it was so intimidating for me to go online and start to look up diabetes because I really just didn't want to be inundated with negativity. And I did some looking. I went on Instagram and started finding like some women who were going through pregnancy or had just gone through pregnancy, and somebody had tagged your podcast in there. And I decided to go on and take a look at your podcast, and I listened to the episode with Jenny Smith that you recorded on pregnancy. And I remember I like turned it off and I was like, nope, it's not going to work. I am like Midwestern through and through. And I remember being like, nope, he's telling me what to do. Like, he is East Coast. He's so brash. I can't listen to this. There's no way. And I went on a walk and I was like, nope. My defenses were all up, I think, from going to the doctor and having them tell me what to do. And I like went back home and I listened to it again. And I'm so glad I did, because I could just take a breath and listen to like the real information that was there. And really from then on, I used this podcast multiple times a day to learn what the heck I was doing and learn how to have a healthy pregnancy. And for that, I'm just like so grateful. And that's why I reached out to you, as number one, just to tell you like, a successful pregnancy happened because of the information that you've put together, like through the interviews and then through the pro tip series. Like that's what got me going. And what really gave me the confidence to do so much advocacy during pregnancy and understand like what was good medicine and what was really outdated practice.
Yeah.
And figure out like how to use these tools and all this information that we have to have a healthy pregnancy and a delivery kind of the way that I wanted it.
Stephanie, I know you think this is a story about you having a healthy pregnancy, but I feel like it's a story about why people who don't like me are wrong. It's their fault, not mine. That's what I heard, in case you're wondering.
I'm so glad that's what came out of this.
Yeah. What I heard is if you're listening right now and you don't like me, that's your problem. I'm fine.
Take a walk. Listen again.
I'm going to tell people in my life this. This is awesome. Like anytime somebody like disagrees with me, I'm going to be like, Stephanie said, this is really you, not me. And you just have to walk away, relax and calm down a little bit, and then come down and listen to me again. I think I'm going to make a lot more sense to you. That joking aside, the part that I find interesting though, is the idea of how often you can get in your own way.
Yeah.
That's what I think I find interesting about it. And around diabetes specifically, I completely understand. There are people who I know love me, who have type 1 diabetes, but are bothered by me talking about it. I get that, right? Because they're like, you don't have it, you don't know, or I'll make an assumption about something and they'll be like, you're wrong. And I'll say to them, well, like, I mean, I disagree with you, but is it because you have it, I'm wrong? Couldn't I just have a different perspective? Maybe I don't have your perspective. Maybe we're both wrong. Maybe we're both a little right. Like, who cares? Like, I'm not saying like you have diabetes, like go to hell, like whatever I say counts, like not obviously what I mean. But I do think that you can have, I don't know what you would even call them, but like psychological sticking points that make it impossible to either listen to another person to begin with, or hear another person who doesn't have diabetes and go like, I can't listen to that person, or even just that my communication style is different than yours. And you could quickly put me in a bucket and go like, he probably threw a battery at Santa Claus at an Eagles game. Like, you know what I mean? Like that kind of thing. If that's not a story you've ever heard, you really should look it up. But nevertheless, I get that. Like I get where you'd have some sort of a sticking point and something about me or whatever just puts you off and you go, oh no, like, forget this. But I'm telling you that the people who stick with this podcast, they are rolling around with low 6, mid 5 A1Cs and their lives are easier.
Oh, absolutely. And I wouldn't even say, Scott, it was only you. It was listening to Jenny. And I think listening to somebody else kind of like really validate when you're starting a type 1 pregnancy, there are so many guidelines around it.
Yeah.
And I think hearing somebody else say, like, you really need to have your A1C in this area, you really need to avoid spikes over 120. Like hearing somebody else say it was like, I can't have other people telling me what I need to do. I need people helping me learn how to do it.
Oh, okay.
And I felt like the only tools when I initially went for my consultation at High Risk OB, it was well before we decided like we were actually going to start trying. Because I remember growing up and kind of hearing this narrative of like, it's going to be really difficult to have a type 1 pregnancy. You have to plan a year ahead. You cannot have unexpected pregnancy. Like I remember like hearing this over and over. So I went into high risk OB a year before we even like were going to start trying. I met with a nurse practitioner who kind of talked through and said like, okay, I think my A1C was in the mid 6s at that point. And so she's like, okay, you're in a good starting point, but we need you below 6 if you're going to get pregnant. And we need to make sure that your blood sugars staying between, I think it was like 65 and 140, only at 140 for 1 hour, if ever, and then comes right back down. And she kind of told me like the way you're going to do this is through this really controlled diet. So having like certain carbs and for breakfast, snack, lunch, snack, dinner, snack.
Yeah.
And by talking to them several times a week so they could make adjustments in my blood sugar or in my insulin settings.
Fun and super sexy, by the way, for everybody.
Right. It was like, well, this is something I want to do.
Hey, honey, I was thinking that a year from now, we should try to make a baby. Let's go to a doctor now and talk about it. Oh, right. Fun.
And it was like, I think the good that came out of it was like, I walked out of there being like nothing makes you want to do something more than somebody telling you can't do it. It like nothing makes light the fire more of like, all right, so she's telling me I can't do this on my own. And I know I can. I just need to figure out how to do it. I need to learn.
Yeah.
And so that's what I really spent the next year doing was like really, truly learning. And I felt like the reason I was in the mid 6s for my A1C at that point was that I had recently switched to a tandem pump and I had started Control IQ. And I felt like Control IQ was the only way I could ever get my A1C down in the 6s. It was because of this algorithm.
Okay.
And I remember during the appointment, she said like, I can help women do better than the algorithm. And so I heard that as women can do better than the algorithm, right? Like I can learn how to do this.
Or as good as you thought you were doing, you're not really doing that well.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's like really when I started tapping into the podcast and starting to hear voices of people that were really using modern approaches and technology and like individualized approaches instead of feeling like I was on a conveyor belt and I'd be like the third call of the day with the exact same information delivered. And so I spent a lot of time listening to the podcast. I also found this incredible group on Instagram that was led by a dietitian who had type 1 women who were either trying to get pregnant or were currently pregnant.
Okay.
And we met weekly on Zoom and talked about a lot of the things that were talked about in the Pro Tip series, but more in the lens of pregnancy. So we were able to talk about just during the different trimesters, how hormones will change and how that impacts your insulin. We talked about exercise, we talked about mental health, we talked about diet, and then we talked a lot about kind of delivery. And one of the things that stood out to me really early on was this idea that like most hospitals have kind of these policies of not wearing your insulin pump and not using a CGM when you are giving birth, when you're going through labor and when you're giving birth. And I remember that really sticking out to me quite early in the podcast, listening to people that like went into the ER and had these things taken off. That happened to me as a child. Like my insulin pump got taken away and my mom like freaked out when she came back in the room. She was filling out paperwork and came back and she's like, where's her pump? And so that's like the protocol with labor and delivery. And it struck me as like, we are working for so long, a year before pregnancy and then the time of pregnancy to get blood sugars in this really immaculate, perfect range. And then during labor and delivery, the time that they say like really matters quite a lot for the outcome of the baby when they come out and what their blood sugar is like when we're handing it over to somebody else.
Who doesn't
Didn't
know?
make sense to me.
Yeah. So how do you fight back against that? Like, do you start a conversation early or how do you work it out?
Yeah, it was really difficult in my medical system. And I think one of the good things about being involved in the support group, and I would encourage anybody who's going through type 1 pregnancy, like, so in my medical system, the protocol was as soon as you go in for labor and delivery, you go off of your pump and then you kind of join whatever the hospital protocol is, depending on what your blood sugar is at the time of admission to the hospital. And then they kind of use this algorithm to be able to manage your insulin And this is true whether you're a type 1, type 2, or if you have gestational diabetes. It's kind of the same algorithm that's used for everyone.
Why couldn't you just do it yourself?
Against hospital protocol was kind of what I was told at the beginning.
Yeah.
So I started a conversation probably about 6 months into my pregnancy with my care team, because I really wanted to show them at the beginning of my pregnancy that like I could do this. Mm-hmm. I wanted to show them like what I knew about management and how I controlled my diabetes, and get them kind of on my side for it, because I knew there's like a lot that I needed them for. And this was not a part. This was not something that I needed the help with.
Right.
But I really wanted buy-in at the beginning. Spent about 6 months just really learning about how to manage blood sugars during pregnancy and doing a really good job. It went really well. And about 6 months in at my appointment, I first asked if I could see their hospital protocol for when I was in labor and delivery for insulin, because I wanted to be able to have something to kind of use as evidence as to like why this might not work for me, or how like my pump settings and my brain might beat this algorithm that they have. So they gave me their hospital protocol for insulin, and it was super eye-opening. That was a very interesting document to get.
Why?
Just being able to see that there's not a lot of differentiation between the type of diabetes, the type of patient. If I was in there as an 11-year-old versus if I was elderly, 300-pound male, we'd get the exact same protocol.
Right.
And so to me, I was looking at it and I was like, this is fascinating to see, which they need in emergency situations. Absolutely. But it was very interesting to see kind of that lack of any differentiation between the types of diabetes and the type of like experience you're going through in labor and delivery. Like it is such an active experience. When you're giving birth, it's exercise. Like there is just a lot of adjustment that has to be made for that. And the documentation that I was given really didn't reflect that at all.
Yeah. So when you see that, when you say, okay, well, this is the protocol and it just says diabetes on it, like it's not clearly pointed towards me, even towards type 1s, anything at all. And I've got to get this buy-in from them, right? So I like what you're doing here. Like you set up the long con, right? Like you're going to get them on your side, show them how good you are at diabetes, kind of point out some foibles in their plan. And then what do? Then you offer them a solution.
Yeah, exactly. So the next appointment that we went into, I kind of brought their protocol and had gone through it and said, okay, so if I went into the hospital, let's say at 70, which is perfect in terms of pregnancy, that's exactly where you want to be. Their protocol would have me on no insulin.
Yeah. Hey, you got it all the way to 70. We can fix that.
Right. And so like we started there, right? Like we want me to be in this range through all of labor, but like if I'm not getting any insulin, then very quickly I'm going to leave this target zone.
Doesn't it tell you, I'm sorry to cut you off, but doesn't it tell you that what their protocol is, don't get low, we don't care how high you get?
Exactly.
Right.
It was not met very positively when I said that I wanted to do this.
Oh.
The first kind of message I was given was like, we really want you to enjoy labor. We want you to enjoy delivery. We don't want you thinking about diabetes.
What? Did you say I've had diabetes for 24 years? That ship has sailed.
There's not going to be a moment I'm not thinking about this, especially at the end of such an intense experience, right? Of like every moment is about blood sugar and being healthy for yourself and the baby.
Stephanie, if only you would have known, just to have a stranger tell you not to think about your diabetes anymore would have fixed all that. I mean, gosh, you could have done it years ago. That's awesome.
Oh, and a kicker was there was something in the protocol that said like they would test me every 4 hours and make adjustments. And like I found that in there, and I asked them about it, and they're like, "Oh, that's an error. That should say 2." I was like, "What?"
Oh, that's better. That's fine. We'll just know what my blood sugar is every 2 hours. It'll be okay.
Every 2 hours. So yeah, I think that was a key though, was like trying to respect their process first, like get their process down, and really be able to talk smartly about why it wouldn't work for me.
Okay,
was a key part.
Let's pivot for a second. What do you do for a living? How do you know how to manipulate people like this?
I work in communications.
Oh, okay. Yeah, sure. I figured that out. Okay. So tell people your communications degree it's almost a psych degree, right? Like yeah, right? You're learning how to talk to people so that you can get them to have the outcomes you want them to have, and they're happy and you're happy when it's over.
Yeah.
Right. You're a professional.
I'm also a pleaser. I'm also a pleaser. So being in this situation of like pushback was like, it was incredibly new for me. And so I was trying to figure out, like, how do I advocate when I know in my head is what's right? And like, I still want like a collaborative experience, but like, I want to do it my way.
Well, I can tell you're a people pleaser because you were going to bring them information about why you were right about the thing you were saying. I would have just been like, no. Why not? This is how we're going to do it. The truth is you get there both ways. Also, you did more good because you probably taught them to do it a different way.
Well, that was kind of my hope going through too, was, through my whole pregnancy, the woman that was kind of following my blood sugars kept saying, like, I never have had a patient who's made their own adjustments. I've never had a patient be able to do this kind of control. And I kept saying back, I don't think a woman has felt empowered to do that in this system. It's not presented as an option. Mm-hmm. I can't imagine not making my own adjustments and reading my own body cues and what's going on. But like, if you tell them that something bad is going to happen, women aren't going to do it. No. Like, this is such a vulnerable time of life. They're not going to take a risk. Yeah.
And also they know what they're doing when they do that. This was my big complaint about diabetes blogs back in the day, right? They'd be like, I'm going to blog today about pre-bolusing. But first, here's a paragraph and a half about why it's dangerous.
Right.
Awesome. So, if you give your insulin before you eat and, I don't know, an alien comes out of the sky and then we all start running around crazy and you forget to eat, oh my God, your insulin's happening. So what if the aliens come when you're pre-bolus? Now, you don't want to die, do you? And then the next paragraph was like, here are the benefits of pre-bolusing. And you're like, no one's going to do it now.
That describes pregnancy for me entirely. Mm-hmm. There was so much fear tactic used. Really, when you got down to it and you asked so many questions about it, it was so old. Everything was so old. There was nothing they could cite for me when I would ask questions about like, all right, like, why do you not allow somebody to use the data from their CGM during labor and delivery to make insulin adjustments?
Yeah, like, I have this thing I paid $80 for that's better than testing every 2 hours. Like, should we
Which, by the way, in the hospital costs like about $300 every time they test you. So like the Dexcom's a deal.
And for the people who are listening who don't have insurance, I think that is what it costs them. I'm just saying, like, if you had insurance, you're like, look, I paid like $80 for this thing. It works great.
Yeah.
Why don't we not throw it in the garbage? And if you don't want to okay, maybe you don't want to lean on it because you're uncomfortable with it or you haven't used it yet or whatever, but like, why take it off?
Right. Let's try to use it
in conjunction with what we're doing.
Exactly. And that's really what I was advocating for, is this idea of like, how could we find some compromise? I went back in and kind of told them the plan. And during that appointment, I said, like, I would really like to manage my own blood sugar. I'd like to have my Dexcom on, and I'd like to wear my insulin pump during labor and delivery. My husband's going to be with me. He's really versed in all of this, and he too will like be helping control my blood sugars. The woman that I was meeting with pretty consistently was a fellow. And so she kind of reported up to the maternal fetal medicine doctors. And I could tell like she was younger and she was definitely like understanding that the technology was a benefit, but her have words to me constantly were the providers may not all be comfortable with this and they might not sign off on it. So I took that information from that appointment home and put together a birth plan that was just all diabetes, and went through kind of using Jenny Smith's the purple type 1 diabetes book. I definitely recommend that. I used that to help prepare kind of my own birth plan to be able to bring into my next appointment. And it was like 3 pages long and went through like, what is an insulin pump? Because it truly felt like I needed to explain what my insulin pump was doing, what kind of insulin was in it, what is a CGM, what do the arrows mean, where is it connected on my body, how do I use it to make decisions. I went through and put information about how I make like key factors I consider when I'm making blood sugar decisions, what obviously all my current rates were, what my goal ranges were, put together this huge document. And I brought it back into the next appointment. And I think they could tell that I wasn't going to back down on this.
Right.
And she went through and took the document and asked if she could take it to their next staff meeting and talk with all of the doctors in their practice to see if anybody would be comfortable with this.
Okay. To try to find the person to help you have the baby.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good for you. But that's a lot of work that a lot of people
It was so much work.
couldn't do. And they still could have told you to go to hell when it was over.
But could they? So that was my kind of question going through is, could they? Could they say no? This is like my body, my medical devices. Like they can't take them off of me.
No, they could say that I'm uncomfortable with this, so I'm not doing it.
But I'm going to have the baby no matter what.
You're like, look, I'm going to show up.
It's coming.
And this kid's coming out. So you're not going to do anything about it.
Someone's going to catch it.
Were you at the point in your head that you thought that if they don't agree to this, when they reach for my insulin pump, I will just tell them you are not taking that off of me?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
I've heard way too many stories about women who've ended up sneaking insulin in the hospital because they can't get enough to keep their blood sugars down.
Shh, Stephanie, don't tell anybody. That happens all the time.
Yeah. And so it's just, yes, that's exactly what I was going to do.
Take this off. You, no. And by the way, you should have said after that, I thought you wanted me to enjoy this time.
Right. During our next appointment, she came back with a document that I actually pulled out for our conversation today that was handwritten. None of this is in my notes. I went and nothing is officially documented. But I had like a handwritten note from her that was pretty much what you had talked about before with the blogging is like all the things that could go wrong. And in all of those scenarios, they wanted me on an insulin drip and a glucose drip and not an insulin pump. And she sat down with me and my husband, and it kind of went through the scariest things that could happen when you deliver a baby.
Oh, do tell. What did they try to scare you with? Let's hear it.
They tried to scare me with needing a C-section and what would happen if it's an emergency C-section. What would happen if I was unconscious at the point where they needed to decide to do an emergency C-section? What would happen if I had preeclampsia and I had to have magnesium drip and I would be so out of my mind that I couldn't make diabetic or decisions about diabetes and dosing. So they kind of went through this list of things that could happen, which is super valid. And I think looking back, how I wish the conversation was more of how can we empower you to manage your diabetes up until a point, right? Like if we kind of see like the red flag of, hey, this isn't going well. When can we step in instead of here's all the things that we're going to throw at you that can go wrong?
A lot of people plan for failure. And I don't understand them thinking like, I want to be ready when something goes wrong and know what to do. But why are we going to set ourselves up to fail from the beginning because it might happen? Listen, if you were giving birth, and I'm glad that this didn't happen, obviously. I'm glad that the baby came scooting out and everything was fine, right? If there's an emergent situation, then start treating me like an emergent patient. But up until then, I'm doing a thing that I saw some lady doing a blow up pool in her living room. So like let's like act like that's going to happen until it doesn't. And then when it doesn't, go ahead and we'll do the thing. Why are we going to do the thing first when your pump, like even about making insulin decisions, your pump's just giving you basal.
Well, that's what I tried to explain to them is it's in my birth time. Like a pump is an insulin drip.
Yeah. It's the thing you're asking me for, because when I'm asleep, I'm not going to give myself a bolus. So don't worry about it. And by the way, if I like pass out, I'm not going to be worrying about a 180 blood sugar, in case you're wondering. In the end, it's people who don't understand, right?
It is. It entirely is.
Yeah.
And I think that it is fear-based on their end. And
because they don't understand.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
And this isn't what the training is. Like even in working with the new fellow that was working with us throughout, like this isn't her training. And that's really sad to me that like her training in 2023 was not to understand and use an insulin pump. It's wild to me. And in fact, one of the things that she came back with, because I had offered, we will put an iPad out in the room and have the Dexcom app displayed on there. So anytime somebody walks in, they can see what direction my blood sugar is and what it is. And she actually recommended we don't do that because people won't understand. And somebody might come in and make a really quick decision based on what they see on there. And so she recommended we didn't include that information.
Stephanie, do you ever stop and step back and take this experience that you've had and start applying it around the rest of the world and get really scared?
Yeah.
I do that sometimes. I'm like, oh, so the bus driver or the guy over there with the gun, or do any of us understand what we're doing? Is it all just like working because nothing's going wrong? Like, do you know what I mean? Like, and then the minute it goes wrong, you go like, oh, LA did need $17 other million for their fire department. Like, how did we not, like, you know what I mean? Like that kind of stuff is like, I get it. Like, I understand that people are cycling through society constantly, right? Like, new people are always coming in. Older people get tired and busy and they don't have time to re-explain the world every 5 seconds. They don't have time to keep up with new advancements. The people who come in haven't been put through the process yet, like, so they don't really know. So everyone defaults to being like extra cautious, which, listen, I guess is probably a great thing, right? Like, because extra cautious at least might mean alive. But like, I don't understand why when someone steps forward with something different, that our first response is always, that's bad, it's wrong, I don't understand it, so no. And I don't just mean with diabetes, by the way. Like, this runs the gamut of social issues, right? Like, anytime someone says something different, everyone goes, that's bad, no, burn it. I think this is what I was talking about earlier with the parenting thing.
It was,
like,
yeah.
We have not come along far enough yet. Like, our brains can't pivot quickly enough. Like, and if you need an example, just look back to when Facebook used to change what the Facebook page looked like every 6 months.
Yeah.
And people would lose their shit. Why'd you move that button? How come it's a different color? It looked better like this. I'm getting off this goddamn thing. Like, we can't pivot with that. You know what I mean? And now we're all sitting around talking about medical stuff. Like, how come these people can't pivot? Those are the same people who are freaked out by Facebook.
I think the sad thing that I found during it too is like the message we had heard a lot was like, I've never had a patient control their own management. I've never had a patient get this A1C during pregnancy, but like nobody asked me how, or like what tools I was using or what I was doing differently.
No, right.
I got the outcome they asked for with a ton of work. And I felt like I didn't know what to do with it. Like, I had all this information that I had to learn on my own, but they didn't want to hear what it was.
Stephanie, I'm going to say something that's going to sound absolutely ridiculous to people who don't like me, and people who do like me are going to be like, that's right. What should those people have done if they wanted to understand diabetes? Should they have listened to a podcast about it?
That's what I did.
I understand that. Like, they don't have the inkling. They don't even have the need. They're not trying to manage your diabetes. They didn't get it when they were 11. They didn't sit in a room and feel judged by their mother and a doctor. Like, they don't live your life. They don't know. They don't have any of this input. Like, their variables for this are completely different than yours. Also, when they say stuff like, I've never seen anybody with an A1C like this. You know what you should have said? How long have you been doing this? Because the answer might have been 2 years or 6 months. Or how about the answer is, I've been doing this for 20 years and I've never seen anything like this. That doesn't say as much about you as it does about the system.
Right.
I'll give you an example once. A company came to me one time and they had been really heavily steeped in the influencer space to try to get the word out about their thing. I'm going to be very vague about this. Okay.
Okay.
And then they come to me and they say like, you know, we've never worked with a podcast before. And I said, well, you've come to the right one. And they came to me and I did the thing that they asked me to do. And at the end of the first 30 days, they call me up and say, you've just gotten more people to click on this link than every influencer we've ever used historically combined in 1 month. I beat them all for the entire time they had been doing it. And they started treating me like I was special. And I put my hands up and I said, stop. This is not an indication of me. It's an indication of them. I'm not great at this. Those numbers aren't even that great. The influencer model you were trying, it doesn't really work.
Mm-hmm.
It makes likes and clicks and views. But likes and clicks and views aren't someone saying, I trust this enough to follow through. I was like, the reason I worked and they didn't is because people actually trust me.
Yeah.
That's why they clicked on the link. And by the way, it's not like a money thing. Like, so, oh, you're out there like, oh, Scott's selling. Trust me, it's a good thing for everybody, right? But the judgment is what I'm pointing out, is that as soon as they saw me as different, they thought I was special. And I was like, I'm not special. You were just trying something that doesn't work.
Yeah.
That's all. And you had talked yourself into believing that it works. They're influencers. They put pictures up on Instagram and 20,000 people like it. I had to say to somebody once in a sales meeting, in case you're wondering how comfortable this was, they're like, well, we've got this person right here on Instagram. They have type 1 diabetes. They drive a ton of traffic. We're going to go with them. And I said, and I looked And listen, I don't know how to say this in the 2000s without getting in trouble. I'm like, but this girl is in a bikini in every one of these pictures. And they're like, yeah. I'm like, you think she's a diabetes influencer? And they're like, well, she has diabetes. I'm like, look, she's a penis influencer. Okay. Like, and she's doing a great job of it. Like, that girl's gorgeous. People with diabetes aren't looking at her and going, I wonder what she's doing with her insulin.
Right.
They're looking at her and going, I can see her butt cheeks. Like that's what's happening right now. Like, listen, full disclosure, that's exactly what was happening. I don't mean it poorly. Like, I'm not judging her. I'm, again, judging the person that was judging the situation, who's like, we think that's a great diabetes influencer. And I was like, it's a girl in a bikini.
Right.
She's doing something different than what you're doing. And they keep doing it, by the way. And not just one company. A lot of them lean into it. Honestly, like, look at your social media around diabetes in the summertime. It's just companies saying, like, send us your pictures with your gear on, which is code for send us pictures in shorts and and bikinis and bathing suits and stuff like that. And if you have a 6-pack and you're a guy, please also send us your picture with your shirt off. That's really what's happening right now. Now, do they drive big numbers? Do some of these pictures have literally like hundreds of thousands of likes on them? They absolutely do. But those people are not doing the thing that they think that they're doing. Now, I'm off on a little bit of a tangent here, but back to the hospital thing. You're not special. You're just doing it the right way. Right. They're accustomed to watching it being done incorrectly by people who didn't know what to do. And now they've decided that that's what's real. And how in the hell do they not look at you and realize, oh, Stephanie's what's real? We could all do this. Like, I haven't said yet in an hour, it's insane that when you make yourself pregnant and you go to one of these doctors and they tell you, what's the A1C they told you had to keep? 6?
They wanted it under 6.
Okay, right. And you're like, that's not how this works. But the truth is, if you wanted to, you could keep your A1C under 6. Like, it wouldn't be fun all the time, and it would be a lot of work. And I'm not saying otherwise, like, it really would be, but it is functionally possible. Like, so why do we act like it's not functionally possible? Like, why do we say, like, hey, it's important to be super healthy if you're pregnant, but if you're not pregnant, it's not as important?
Well, like, entirely. And I still feel that way. Like, after all that I learned with management and after pregnancy, like, I maintain my A1C well below the threshold for pregnancy in a comfortable, like, livable way.
Oh, you made my deck. That's awesome.
Even my doctor's like, well, you can loosen up now. Like, you're not pregnant.
Awesome. I'm still alive. Like, my cells are still inside of me trying to keep going for as long as they can. Like, and I'm not saying if your A1C is 7 or 8 or 9 or 10 or 11 or 12, I'm not being like, hey, you suck. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that there's a level of success in here for all of you. And it stems on how to use insulin. Mm-hmm. Somebody might hear that who's like ultra low carb and be like, no, if you don't eat carbs, none of this matters. Like, yeah, right. That'd be a way to use insulin, right? Like, eat low carb and use the right amount of insulin for that. There's probably somebody listening who's like, look, I would love to do that, but I got a real problem here. Like, I eat a slice of cheesecake every day and it needs to happen, or I got psychological issues. Like, everything's going to fall apart on me. There's a way to bolus for the cheesecake. Like, I'm not telling you what to eat or how to do or how active or inactive to be or anything like that. And I'm not saying that some of these decisions aren't more healthy than others of them. But there's an amount of insulin and a timing to be used that will work with almost everything. And I want people to understand that so they go out into the world and apply it to their own life and how they eat. Because I think, Stephanie, between you and I don't think that anybody who jumps up and tells people how to eat is going to have any real success widespread. You know what I mean? Like, you might find like a niche of people who are like, yeah, right on, I'm going to do it this way or that way. But there's millions of people who have type 1 diabetes. We're not going to get them all to be keto. So, like, instead of beating that drum, my drum is, timing and amount. Like, learn how to use insulin, apply it to your life. I think you'll have better outcomes than the ones you're having now. Well,
entirely. And I bring that back to even like my first appointments in high risk when they were telling me how to eat. Instead of teaching me how to use insulin really effectively and trying to think about, like, how are you going to live your life when you walk out of this office? And instead of me calling every week or twice a week to tell you how you should be doing it, think about how to make your individual life work with this pregnancy.
So you just made such a point that I've always been like fascinated by, I don't know what people call them at this point, but like, kind of those bro podcasters who are just like, what you got to do is get up in the morning and then you go submerge yourself in minus 1900 degree water for 3 minutes. Now, if you don't, that can kill you. Then you get out of that, and now you got your cytokines going. And then what I need you to do is go on a 19-mile run. You understand what I'm saying? 19 miles. And like do this, then do that. Then go to the beach and then lift a boat up and then walk out into the surf with it. Hold over your head for 25 minutes. Now, after you've done that, yeah, okay, cool. I'm glad that's your life. All right. But like, that's not everyone's life. And nobody can do those. Most people can't do those things. But moreover, when you tell people to do stuff like that, psychologically, they go, no, you. You and I have been talking for an hour now. You've been listening to the podcast for a while, I assume, right? The first time you heard me, you called me brash.
Mm-hmm.
How would you describe me now?
How would I describe you now?
Am I brash?
No, I mean, in the best way.
Ah, right. It was how you interacted with brash, because I'm still brash.
Yeah,
I'm absolutely.
you are.
Yeah, of course I am. I'm all the things you think I am. I'm from the East Coast. I'm brash. I have no filter that I can tell. I know the things I'm saying can be interpreted differently, but I leave that to you to figure out because you're a fucking adult. Figure it out. Like if you're taking me that way, how do I say this? I'm adopted. I was once listening to a radio show as a younger person, and the person started making fun of adopted people. And I started to get upset. And then I stopped and I thought, I've been listening to this show for 10 years and laughing every day when he makes fun of these people and those people and those people and those people. And he got to me and I was like, hey, what the hell? And I stopped myself. I was like, that's ridiculous. Mm-hmm. If that's funny, this is funny. I adjusted my idea of what funny was. In my personal life, I would tell you that I think if you want to say you have a good sense of humor, you have to be able to hear maybe the harshest joke and see what's funny about it. You don't have to find the topic funny or, but you have to see where the humor is. You can know it's funny and not laugh, I guess. And so over and over and over again, people hear things and it puts them off. And then they decide, oh, I'm not going to do that. But that happens with food constantly, right? So you tell someone what to do and they're going to do the opposite. And some people have it more strongly than others. And some people are, more people pleasers and they'll just do it and silently be angry forever. It'll ruin their life in a different way. Arden's the kind of, if you tell Arden anything about her health, she will do the opposite. Yeah. Like that's just how she knows it. She'll tell you and she'll tell you, I don't know why. She's like, I don't even want to. But like, if you remind me to take something or to do something, I'll almost not do it on purpose but not consciously. I believe that then when that's the world, if you're trying to help people, then it's not just as easy as jumping up on your bro podcast and telling them like, you want to be thin, close your mouth.
Yeah.
Even if that is actually the answer, that's not going to get anybody anywhere.
And that's exactly how I felt through the experience was like, you telling me your answer isn't my answer.
Right. Even if it's right. And I know that doesn't make any sense, but people, you know what I mean? We're complex. We're basically ants that got thumbs and now we're thinking and we're like, a lot of this doesn't make sense still. That's what I mean by like another 500,000 years. Like, look, I don't know what the average, I don't know, however you measure intelligence. I don't know what the average one was 300, 500, 1,000 years ago, but it all seems to work a little better now. Imagine 3, 5, 1,000 years in the future. Like, what if the average, I don't know how valuable an IQ measurement is, but what if the average IQ jumps up 50 points and all of a sudden people have a lot more emotional intelligence. And when someone says to you, hey, don't eat a Twinkie, eat that, you just go, oh, okay, well, if that's right, then I'll do that. But right now, that's just not how people work. Yeah. So you're like already freaked out, want to get pregnant. You're putting a ton of effort into it. You get there and find out like, oh God, like everything they're saying is opposite of what I'm doing and what I'm doing is working. So if it's opposite of what I'm doing that's working, it's really not going to work. And then I'm going to be pregnant. It's going to be too late. Now you're scared. You luckily step forward and advocate, whereas most people would just step back and either say, I don't want to have this fight, or they would take the doctor's word as, and I'm not judging anybody, but you would take it as like a prescription to f off, because you'd be like, oh, if he says it's not important, then it ain't important. That kind of thing. Like now it's like a free 9 months you just have off because you were told by a physician that it wasn't to be worried about. Yeah. Then you go forward from there. And if the baby comes out and cries, the doctor's going to think they did the right thing.
They did it. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Oh, trust me, I know. Everybody's very complicated. Talk a little bit more about how I'm an asshole. In what ways did you dislike it when you heard it at first?
Do that.
Oh, it's okay. I'll have my wife send you the list. You don't have to make your own. I'm sure the list has already been written. Oh, Stephanie, Arden and I were having this conversation the other night. I'm going to ask you the question, right? She said, I don't remember how this started, but it was down to like, she was watching this person. It might have been Theo Vaughn. Do you know Theo Vaughn?
I don't.
Yeah, there's no way you know that. But he was apparently having a conversation with his mother about something. And he out of nowhere says like, what if once a year you were allowed to kill a person? And so we went through this thought exercise together. And I stopped and I said to Arden, you know what the question really is for people? If it was legal for once a year for everyone to kill one person, Stephanie, would you still be alive?
Oh, that's a good question.
It is, because now you have to think about all the people in your life that don't like you and how much
on my list, yes.
And how much don't they like you? And then we started talking. I said, I might start asking everyone on the podcast that question. And I also said, isn't it interesting? Because I bet you'd have fewer famous people. Because there'd be like, if you were famous, like somebody out there would wish me dead if that was the thing. You know what I mean? Like there's too many people know who I am. And one of them doesn't like me, and put in that position where most people wouldn't want to kill somebody. If, you woke up on January 19th or 27th, the 4th of whatever, whenever we make this thing, and you wake up and you're just like, okay, well, it's the day I have to write down someone's name. I don't really want anybody to die. I'm going to kill some random famous person who I don't like.
Right.
And then we start talking about like, how many votes would those people get?
Yes.
Right?
I'm alive.
Okay, you're actually thinking about it.
Nobody picked me.
Nobody picked you. Oh, God, that's hilarious. Thank you. But yeah, like think about that. Like how many people would wake up tomorrow and then vote for, a political person? And how would that feel if you got to know before it happened? Like, 18 million people voted for you to die today. Trust me, there's a lot around this question. I think it's a game show.
There really is.
Yeah. Anyway, thanks, Theo Vaughn. Have we not talked about anything that we should have talked about? Anything that you wanted to cover that we haven't covered?
I guess how it ended.
Go. Oh, yeah. You made a baby. Tell us about that.
Yeah, we had a baby. So all that to say, with like the negotiations that went back and forth, we did end up kind of like the thing that I kept asking. They kept saying like the providers might not be comfortable with it. On the day of the doctor delivering your baby might not be comfortable with this. Like we can sign off on it being like your plan, but it might not happen on the actual day.
Okay.
And so the thing that I kind of kept going back with was like, well, then what would happen? Like if I'm not going to, if I'm managing my insulin and we get in there and somebody's not comfortable with it, like what would they do? And that was like really not something that ever could be answered for me, what they would actually do if that was my preference going in. And so that's kind of how we left it before delivering the baby, was like, this is the goal of the plan. I might get there and have a doctor tell me no, but then what if I say no?
Mm-hmm.
And that was just kind of where we left it. I ended up going in and getting induced, which is one of those things that's like protocol for diabetic women. And I decided like I was going to be okay with that part just because I was asking for so much leniency with the
you gave up induction to get your plan.
Yeah, I felt like that was one thing they felt really strongly about, is that you should be induced. And we kind of went back and forth on that. And I ultimately decided it wasn't the battle that I wanted to fight. It didn't feel as dire to me as being able to manage blood sugars during delivery.
My wife gave up a name to get a circumcision.
Oh! That's not what I was expecting you to say.
That's what she did. She wanted to call Cole Nicholas. I wanted to call Cole Cole. I don't know why. Oh, God. By the way, all you listening, don't get a podcast, because you end up saying stuff like this. And as you're saying it, you're like, what am I doing? I'm circumcised. And back then there was like this whole kind of like, people were really talking about not doing it. And I guess I had kind of got like swept up in it. And I was like, I don't know, like, should we get him circumcised? Maybe not. And my wife's like, yes, definitely. As a person who's been on the business end of a penis more than once, I think it should be circumcised. And I was like, well, I don't know. That's not what people are saying. So we're going back and forth. And then we got into the horse trading section of making a baby. And she's like, you can call him Cole if we can get him circumcised. And I was like, all right.
Deal. Shake on it.
Yeah, I'm sure he's thrilled I just said that, but whatever.
Sorry, Cole.
Yeah, he's fine. He's doing okay. Okay, I'm sorry. So So that's the idea. Like, we'll wait and see what happens.
We go to the hospital. Right. We get induced overnight. I had a super, super fast labor. I went in and got the first part of the induction place. They place a pill and say all right, go to sleep. And when you wake up, we might have to do this 4 times and then move on to the next phase to try to get your body ready. And luckily for me, just placing that pill and going to sleep for a little while, I laid horizontally, I didn't sleep. That was enough to really get things moving. And when I kind of got up and started moving in the morning, my labor just started naturally. And that was great.
Right.
When we got there, I was the first thing I'm going to do is give my birth plan to the nurse that's on call. And when they checked me in, they really didn't ask any questions about diabetes. They must have seen my birth plan in my chart, but nobody asked about it. Nobody asked about my pump. Nobody asked about my sensor. So I just kept them on and kept my mouth shut. So I'm all right, I'm just going to do this first part of labor with my pump on with CGM. I'm not going to bring it up until somebody brings it up to me. And so we were kind of just waiting for somebody to come in and ask us about it and to kind of start that conversation to confront it. And the next shift of nurse came in and told me that she had read through my birth plan and she said, your diabetes better than I do. We're going to let you do it.
Right.
It was such a relief. And it ended up being the nurse that we worked through all of labor and delivery. The doctor on call apparently was okay with the plan. I never saw him, so I never really knew. I never talked with him, but apparently from behind the scenes, kind of Oz was okay with the plan. This thing that we spent all a year and a half really working on and negotiating on the day of was almost a non-issue. A
big nothing burger. And
oh my gosh, a non-issue.
Were you son of a bitch?
Well,
all this
for
effort.
so many reasons, but I don't think we could have gotten there without it, right? I think we needed all that. But first off, my blood sugar was 80 steady through all of labor and delivery, a sip of juice here, no issue. So all those things I prepared for, okay, if I'm rising, if I'm falling, how fast am I? We didn't have to use any of that. The thing that did go wrong, I will say, is we got to the point where I was really close to starting pushing. About an hour before I started pushing, I heard a noise that I had never heard before from my sensor. And I looked at my phone and it said sensor failure.
You were of course.
I'd never had a failed sensor up until that point. And it was all I did for months and months was tell my doctors, this is technology. We need to be using it. We need to be using it. And then it
the thing was and it makes that noise that goes, and you're wait, what? No, not now.
Look at me. He's what is that? I'm I literally have no idea.
It's nothing. Don't worry about it.
It was so funny. He's what do we do? I'm we are the sensor. So he would just grab my finger and test me every couple minutes, and probably every 10 minutes or so, he'd just test me, and he handed me a new Dexcom, and I in between contractions slapped it on my arm to the point where I was so out of it, pushing and getting ready to, that I actually put it in my elbow crease.
Oh.
It's out of it and just put a new sensor on. Let's go. Let's do this.
Where'd she put it? She put it on her forehead. It's weird.
It's really weird. I was I have to live with this for 10 days. All that to say, though, we did all that work. So during labor and delivery, diabetes, I didn't have to worry about it. And it really did go well. And even when we had a little issue with the sensor, we could deal with it. It didn't throw anything off. It was okay.
I want people to know that there's an amount of effort that's going to go into diabetes. You can't avoid it. But you can control where the effort goes. And I think you did that, first of all. I think you controlled where your effort went. And even though you hit a speed bump, you were able to go through it. The way I talk about that more day to day is that, if you put that effort into understanding bolusing for your meals and getting your settings right, if that's where your effort is, then your effort might not be spent nearly as much on the back end. With, oh my God, I got so high after a meal, and then I finally bolused, and then it came down and I got low, and I woke up at 2 a.m. and I was still low, or I was still high, or all that's that's a ton of effort, right? Just take all that effort that you're putting in one way or the other, because now it's effort to stay alive. Take the effort to stay alive from, oh God, I'm about to die, I got to do something, and shift it to pre-planning and making decisions up front that don't lead to the rest of those problems.
Yeah, I think it was about being proactive for sure. And the proactivity just gave me the confidence to do it and to know I was making the right decision for myself. ultimately, like, one of the reasons I wanted to come on was just to put a positive experience out there, because it's a space like I haven't found like a good resource to go to for pregnancy, preparing for it, and kind of like labor and delivery as a type 1. I hear stories every once in a while, but like when I was in that situation, I just like soaked them up anywhere I could find them. And so I just wanted to add like one more kind of positive birth story, but also just like the work that it took to get there out into the universe, to say like it is possible, and trusting your own instincts is so important. Like, even like right after he was delivered, they tested my blood sugar, because like they were testing my blood sugar alongside my Dexcom. And then they came back in like an hour or two later with a glucose drip. And I was like, what are you doing? And they're like, oh, well, your blood sugar was in the 70s.
You're like, yeah, I've been trying to do that for 24 years. Thank you. I finally go,
Yeah. And like that a couple hours ago was my protocol. Like, I was supposed to have it there. And also that blood sugar, it was like 2 hours old, and you're going to hang a glucose strip
now.
So like, I think you're right. Like so much has happened since then. Like I've eaten, but there's so many things where it's like, trust your gut, trust your instinct. I'm not saying to be difficult, but like, you are your own advocate. And the thing that I found is like, nobody really was looking out for me and the baby at the end of the day except me.
That's right.
We weren't looking out for a bottom line. We weren't worried about liability. Like, we were looking out for ourselves. And that's just something that I took away from it, was just how important that inner voice is.
Yep. You're the decider. Just like George Bush said one time. You remember when he said that? I am the decider. I was like, oh my God.
Man. Man.
Now we yearn for that level of stupidity. It's a wonderful quote. Like, he's like, I'm the decider. And I was like, all right, brother. It's like, you get out there and decide.
Nothing like confidence.
It's not my favorite quote of his, but my favorite one is I don't even want to go into it. I've probably said it like 6 times on the podcast. But anyway, George Bush has a couple of awesome quotes that I love.
Oh, absolutely. I think mine was like, where dreams take wing.
Oh my God. He's awesome. He's such a quote machine. And he's getting old now, so it's even hard to like, look back and I just still remember it fondly. Oh God. Not the point. Point is, you're the decider. You took care of things. You prepared. You tried to get everybody around you to understand. Turns out, by the way, that the people in that room with you had more common sense about diabetes than the people who were setting it up. And it's funny because your experience getting your pregnancy set up, like your delivery setup, is exactly mimicking of anybody who's ever taken their car to a place to be fixed. And there's an intake person. And you say to the intake person, how long do you think this is going to take? How much do you think it's going to cost? And they can't answer you, because if it costs more or takes longer than what they say, then they're in trouble, right?
Yeah.
Then one day you bump into the mechanic and you go, hey, I'm bringing my car in next week. How long do you think this is going to take? And the mechanic will go, it's going to take 2 days, because the mechanic does the work, right? Like, they know. And so the person you're talking to in the beginning is giving you worst case scenario because they don't want to overpromise anything. And by the way, you could be one of those people who like starts having a baby and then codes. That happens, like, right. And that's also not a thing they want to say to you. They don't want to go, Stephanie, well, look, we'd love to do this, but some people die giving birth. They're not going to say that to you because it doesn't happen frequently, but they're still prepping for it one way or the other, you would hope. Right. And then you get on the day in the room and now you're you and you're speaking and you're prepared and you understand. And the nurse looks and because the nurse has been in that exact situation, the nurse can look at you and go, Stephanie knows more about this than I do. Let's just do what she wants to do. And that person is the decider. Like, the problem is that you're setting the whole thing up with not the person who's going to make the decisions at the end.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a limitation of the situation to some degree.
It certainly is. And I think for women that can find one and afford one, like, having a doula would be such a good way to be able to like prevent you from having to be that voice the entire time. Mm-hmm. I worked really hard to try to find a type 1 doula because I really just wanted somebody who had the language and could help me negotiate if I needed it. I don't live in an area with a ton of diabetic resources. So like, I just couldn't find one. I tried for a while, but like, if you can, that would be such an amazing way to have somebody in the room who's an advocate for you and your diabetes and your diabetes plan. If you're feeling like uncomfortable with managing it on your own, I would strongly recommend that.
Yeah. Well, if you ever do this again, you'll know, And also, Stephanie, there's an old saying in Tennessee. I know it's in Texas, probably in Tennessee, that says, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me, you can't get fooled again. That's the one I love. Yeah. So you won't get fooled again. You'll be okay.
Totally.
Do you think you'll make a little more babies?
We haven't decided yet. Yeah, we're enjoying the one right now.
Mm-hmm. Did you look at how much college cost?
Yeah, we're enjoying the one right now.
Yeah. Trust me, one's already too many. And I'm sure it's lovely and all, but like one's fine. And if you have two, I'd say the same thing to you guys. Two's fine. Just slow down. They're very, very, very expensive. That's all I'll say. Also, I refer you back to the first 20 minutes of the conversation. It'll probably be fine.
Great.
Yeah, I'm sure she won't be anything. Is it a boy? It's a boy, right?
A boy, yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure he won't be anything like you and hassle your mom like you did and all that stuff.
Exactly.
No,
exactly.
It probably won't happen at all. Yeah, awesome. I have an interesting question. We already been going long, so I'm going to go 5 more minutes. Because you just had a baby, but you had a baby in 2024, right? 2023,
2023.
Right.
Yep.
So you live in this culture now where people live in their homes and work in their homes and can't afford homes. And where you have to be seeing people who have 18, 20, 23-year-old, children who are still at home trying to save money up to get out of their home. If it's like that now and we don't change anything, then you're not bringing up a child in a world where I just got to get them to 18, they go to college, then they get a job and they move out. And I really don't see them much after that, right? Like you're living in a new world where your kid could go to college or not, come home or still be home and have to live there into their 20s in order to afford their own home. I don't think we realize how much that's going to change parenting and that structure because you're accustomed to leaving home still like, all right, my parents meant well. I started seeing them getting older as I got older. I could see them slowing down or I could see them making some stupid mistakes or they did stuff I didn't agree with, but then you leave. But when you get to hang around for an extra 4 or 5 years where you're like more of a sentient thinking person, I get worried about what happens when they leave. Like, are they just going to leave and be like, oh, thank God I got out of there. Those people are like falling apart around me. Like, do you think anything about that at all? It's so early, but I'm wondering.
No, entirely. I do. I mean, I guess less in the context of being a parent and more like the kind of age group I'm in where when I graduated, like I was one of the fortunate people that was able to get a job during the recession. And like, I didn't move back in with my parents, but so many people did. And it took a lot of my friends quite a bit of time to be able to get a job and to be able to afford a house and move out. And yeah, those relationships with their parents, I don't envy having to parent a 20-year-old living in your house. It's totally different, especially after if they've gone off to college and had that independent experience.
Yeah, it's hard. Like I'm telling you right now, like my son's, still here working things out. Like, and he's got a job. He's working right now. He's actually doing great at his job, which is awesome. But if we threw him out in the world right now, he'd be renting for the rest of his life.
Yeah.
Right. And so like we're, trying to give him a little bit of a, like, don't get me wrong. It'd be nice if you could just write somebody a check and be like, here's money to buy a house with. But, that's not my situation. So like, so he's here trying to like save up. He is actually saving up, which is awesome. But I still wonder about the rest of it, like the interpersonal stuff and how it's going to change, like going forward in this next generation. How are adult children going to see their parents when they lived with them a little too long? Do you know what I mean? I can't wait to find out. I'm going to try to
do, but I also think about from your perspective as a parent of an adult child, like it changes your relationship with your children. Yeah. And it also, like you're kind of in this situation now where you're sort of parenting an adult and you're also potentially like caring for your elder parents as well. Like it sandwiches you so much more.
Also, you don't realize how much of parenting works because the person you're parenting listens to you.
Yeah.
And doesn't have their own thoughts. Like the part about parenting, when you're building people up, you're teaching them what to think about.
Right.
But once they know what to think about and they've decided that everything they think isn't the thing you think, which by the way is what you want. It's not like a bad thing. But then once that happens and then there's a moment where they need to be parented again, even in like small ways. And you're like, I think this. And they look at you like, yeah, you're an idiot. And you're like, oh, oops, what happened? Like when you were 8, you would just go, okay, and then do it.
Right.
Yeah. And maybe I am an idiot. So then you turn it back on yourself and you go like, oh God, is that wrong? Like, because like I said earlier, all I did was like, I thought about it the best I could. This is my answer. So now we're finding ourselves blending everyone's opinions together more, which is, I think, really good, but it's hard, like from my perspective.
Well, with 4 like grown independent thinkers, absolutely.
Yes, they all have an opinion. Everybody's right about something. Everybody sees something a little different. You're trying to blend it all together, but at the same time, you have to give away your ego while it's happening. Because you're like, well, I thought this, but that does sound better. Maybe we should do it more like that.
Right.
And then you kind of have to like swallow hard and go, yeah, I think that's a good idea. Like, let's try that. So anyway, I can't wait to see what happens. It's going to be interesting. Hopefully these new medications and stuff will keep me alive long enough I can figure out how it went. But anyway, you go make another baby and name it Scott, okay?
Oh, I'll add it to the list.
Oh, stop it, Stephanie. Nobody's naming their baby Scott. That's ridiculous. What a terrible name. There's no, it's Scott. Listen to it. Scott. You know what I mean?
I don't think there's anything wrong with it.
It's short and it doesn't have a lot of, I don't know. There's no zhuzh at all. You know what I'm saying?
It feels just familiar to me. Like we know Scott. We all know Scott.
But that's because it's me. I don't use my name doesn't get really spoken much. Like you guys know it because it's me. But like in my real life, like people don't refer to me as Scott. Like I get dad or hey or stuff like that. My wife, might say something like asshole or something. I don't know exactly how she does it. People don't look at me often and go Scott, but I use people's names all the time. Like when I talk to people, I use their names.
You do?
Yeah, but it's not common in the world really. Like, cause I even do it with a waitress or a waiter.
I feel like when people do, my impression is always like you're in trouble, but like you're being told something really important. Like, Stephanie, you better pay attention. Stephanie, like refocusing me.
I just say thank you to people. The reason like dropping a car off is in my head today is like I had to drop my car off to have work done on it. And the person was like, hey, I want the mechanic to look at it. And I was like, okay. So the mechanic like put his coat on and everything. He was coming over to come outside. And as he approached me, I reached out and I shook his hand. And I was like, hey, I'm Scott. Thank you. And he said, I'm John. And I said, it's nice to meet you, John. And he said, you too. But he looked at me like, this is weird. What are we in a 1920s movie? And I was like, I thought. Yeah. And I'm just like saying hi to the guy. Right. But my kids all the time are like you freak the waiters out when you use their name. I'm like, it's on their shirt. Like, am I not supposed to say thank you, Stephanie? Like at the end, like, I hope you have a good day. Like, you know what I mean? I don't know. This has gone way too long. Rob's going to charge me extra to edit this. We have to be done now. All right. Hold on a second. Dexcom sponsored this episode of the Juicebox Podcast. Learn more about the Dexcom G7 at my link, dexcom.com/juicebox. Omnipod 5 sponsored this episode of the Juicebox Podcast. Learn more and get started today at omnipod.com/juicebox. Links in the show notes, links at juiceboxpodcast.com. Earlier, you heard me talking about Blue Circle Health, the free virtual type 1 diabetes care, education, and support program for adults. And I know it sounds too good to be true, but I swear it's free. Thanks to funding from a big T1D philanthropy group, Blue Circle Health doesn't bill your insurance or charge you a cent. In other words, it's free. They can help you with things like carb counting, insurance navigation, diabetes technology, insulin adjustments, peer support, prescription assistance, and much more. So if you're tired of waiting 9 months to get in with your endo or your educator, you can get an appointment with their team within 1 to 2 weeks. This program is showing what T1D care can and should look like. Currently, if you live in Florida, Maine, Vermont, New Hampshire, Ohio, Delaware, Missouri, Alabama, Mississippi, Iowa, or Louisiana, if you live in one of those states, go to bluecirclehealth.org to sign up today. The link is in the show notes. And please help me to spread the word. Blue Circle Health had to buy an ad because people don't believe that it's free. But it is. They're trying to give you free care. If you live in Florida, Maine, Vermont, Ohio, Delaware, Alabama, and Missouri, it's ready to go right now. And like I said, they're adding states so quickly in 2025 that you want to follow them on social media at Blue Circle Health. And you can also keep checking bluecirclehealth.org to see when your free care is available to you. Hey, thanks for listening all the way to the end. I really appreciate your loyalty and listenership. Thank you so much for listening. I'll be back very soon with another episode of the Juicebox Podcast. The episode you just heard was professionally edited by Wrong Way Recording. WrongWayRecording.com.